Brilliant. Right. Good morning, everyone. I'm Jamie. I'm not the person you can see on webcam. So yeah, if you're wondering why I'm speaking and there's no lips moving, but yeah, I'm Jamie, and I work with the Service Desk Institute. Thank you for joining us today on this webinar, which is about getting started with experience level agreements and introduction there. So during the webinar, Neil, who you can see on camera at the moment, will give you an overview of XLAs and best practice approaches to making experience improvements. And there'll also be an introduction to the new Essence of Experience SLA training courses, one of which SDI are privileged to be running in October. I'll give you more details on that towards the end. And if you've got any questions that you may have that pop up in your head during the webinar as Neil's speaking, you can ask them via the chat box in the GoToWebinar window at the bottom there. And I'll catch them and I can put them to Neil at the end. And you'll also see throughout the webinar that we'll be running a couple of polls to kind of help gauge, where people might be at with their XLA experience to date. Yep, so that's me, but I'll hand over to Neil Keating now. Neil's the co-founder and CEO of Brighthorse, and Brighthorse are all about helping customers realize and make experience improvements to deliver better service. So that's enough for me. Neil, over to you.
Thanks, Jamie.
Yep, I can see your screen. All good.
Perfect. Okay, thanks, Jamie. Well, welcome everybody. Nice to be introduced to you all. So as Jamie said, my name is Neil Keating. We'll crack on with the presentation in a minute. Just a quick introduction to what we're going to go through today. Really, today's session is around introducing you to experience level agreements. We'll talk about what experience is. We'll talk about how you might define experience. We'll talk about how you can measure experience and why that measurement is important. And then I'm going to introduce you to the topic of experience level agreements, and we'll show you an experience level agreement in practice as we go through. So that's what I aim to cover over the next 45-50 minutes or so. I think we're on this for about an hour, so I'll try and leave some time at the end for questions. So as Jamie said, please do put them in the chat towards as you go through, and I'll try and answer as many questions as we can. If there's questions that we need to answer outside of this, then I'm more than happy to do that as well, and we can follow up with anyone who has any burning issues or burning questions. My aim over the next sort of 45-50 minutes is to really try and inspire you, to motivate you to have a different way of thinking. I'm really trying to get people to think around why employee experience is important, what you could achieve if you really did improve the experience of those people around you, whether that's to do with you, your services, your department, your organization, but really just about how people could feel about if you improved what you were doing and what that might mean for your business. So that's what we're really about. Okay. So with that ado, I'm going to switch my webcam off because you don't want to see my face throughout this presentation, and then we'll crack on with what we're doing. Okay. So just by way of introduction to me, as James said, my name is Neil Keating. For the last 25 years or so, I've been working in lots of managed IT service companies, so IT managed service type organizations, and helping to design, build, and then execute service level agreements. So a large part of my career has been working with customers in giving them the service level agreements that we thought they wanted, and then actually reporting against those. So I've got a good understanding of service level agreements, and I've got a good understanding of how you can almost drive coaching horses through them to try and avoid any sort of penalties, etc., etc. So for the past 7 years, really, we started Brighthorse, and I'm the CEO, Chief Experience Officer at Brighthorse, and I'm also an experience ambassador. And what does that mean? Well, that means that I have undertaken, passed all the accredited experience courses that we deliver. We work with a partner organization of ours in the States called Citrus Collab, and we've co-built a number of courses, a number of experience assessments and experience consultancy services. And if you take all of those, they're all accredited courses, and you become an experience ambassador. And really what we do, the essence of what we do as an organization, is we help organizations understand and then build experience journeys for their organization, why that might be important. We help them with the business case, we help them with the assessments, and they help them with education. Now, a number of these slides here you'll see today have actually come from our experience courses that we deliver. So if anyone's interested in that, there is one that we are running with the SDI. I think it's 21st of October. It'd be great if you could register for that and see some of you on that as well. And that is a fully accredited course if you want to go and take the exam afterwards. All right. If you've got any questions about anything I'm doing, please feel free to link in with me. Go up to our website and or email me directly, and I'll happily answer any questions that you've got. Just before we kick off, just so I know the sort of where people are in the audience and what people are doing, I just wanted to run a very quick poll about who started their experience level journeys now. So I think we'll just open up the poll, so it'd be great if you could just answer that question. Just want to see whether people have started, where they are on the journey, what's left to do, that kind of activity. So if you could just say, answer those questions. It'll only take a second. We'll close it down in a few seconds time, and then we'll see where we are. Okay, so hopefully that's given everyone just enough time to just answer that question. If we'll close that poll now, and then we'll see what the answers are. Okay, I can't quite see the results there.
We got about 50%, half the people here are saying that they need to do so. They haven't yet, and about the other half are saying that they've not had any experience to date. Okay, fantastic. Well, that's kind of what I expect, really, because this movement, this whole employee experience movement, is really driving forward, and I'm seeing a lot of innovative organisations now, and helping a lot of innovative organisations build out their experience level agreements. But we are finding that most of those people are at the early stages of that, and then a number of other organisations who are thinking about it, and it's on the CIO agenda. People like Forrester, Gartner are all saying now that over the next couple of years, one of the big things on all CIOs' agendas will be experience and improving employee experience, and how you can measure that, and implementing experience level agreements. So that's interesting. Okay, thank you for that. So really what I'm going to cover now is this session really covers, why does experience matter? How can you define experience, and why is this important? So what's the business case if you're going to go and start this journey, or you're just starting off your journey? Why would you do this in the first place? So just to kick off, I always like to start with a couple of quotes. And the guy on the left here is a guy called Sinek. I don't know if anyone knows him, but I'm a big fan of him. He's a motivational speaker and a big TED talker, and he talks a lot about the theory of why, and why you do something is just as important as what you do. And he talks about Apple and how successful they've been, now worth more than the whole of the FTSE 100, and they've got a whole theory of why they do it that drives the whole company and the employees to love the company, and therefore their customers become very loyal because their employees are very happy working for that organization. And he says customers will never love a company until the employees love it first. And then on the right, I'm sure you all know Richard Branson, and he says clients do not come first, employees come first, and if you take care of your employees, they will take care of your clients. And I'll come back to Virgin shortly, because I used to work there. And all I'd say though is when I was working there, everything that company did, I worked for Virgin Management Limited, which was the part of the business that Richard worked in, and everything was all driven around employee experience. And pretty much, and you never please everybody, but I would say about 95% of the people who worked at Virgin did so not because they were turning up for a check, did so because they genuinely loved the organization, and that made us more innovative, and that made our customers much more loyal as well. So two very important things there. But I think the most important quote that if you're going to remember anything from today's session at all, then this is what I'd really love you to remember. And this is a quote by Maya Angelou, who's a famous American poet. And she says, people will forget what you said, people will forget what you did, but people will never forget how you made them feel. And for me, that sums up the whole of this presentation, and also the whole of the improving employee experience topic, really, because she mentions the F word, and that's the word feelings. Because I think, simply put, measuring and understanding employee experience is really about how someone feels, whether that's how they feel about you, whether that's how they feel about your services, your organization, what you do, but it's about how they feel. And what you're trying to do when you're doing employee experience is understand and measure and get facts from those feelings. So how do you define it then? So I guess experience is about customer satisfaction, dissatisfaction with your brand, your product, your service, and it's about those positive and negative customer interactions that you have. Now for me, part of my role as a consultant is I've traveled around a bit, and I've normally flown
cheaper end of the airlines, and I used to fly a lot of Ryanair and I used to fly a lot of EasyJet. Haven't done in the last 6 or 7 months or so, understandably, but I felt that they're two similar brands, and I'm going to suggest they have the similar service level agreements, takeoff, landings, delays, all of those kind of things. But I feel very differently, and this is a personal opinion, I feel very differently about both those brands. So when I flew Ryanair out of Ireland once, so it was actually a family holiday. I had my young children with me. I packed the suitcases. My suitcase was, I put more clothes in my suitcase and less in theirs. So my suitcases got it onto the conveyor belt, was slightly over, but my children's suitcases were a lot under. And I thought, okay, that's okay. We're all well under the quota, but they wouldn't let me through until I paid them £150. It wasn't to do with the weight, it just wanted the £150. And the way they treated me through that, there was no sympathetic sort of understanding. Okay, why don't you just take some stuff out, move that around, and we'll weigh them again if that's what they need to do. It was no, you can't do anything about it. You've got a queue behind you. We need £150, or you've got to go right to the end of the queue. And since that time, I've now actively avoided flying Ryanair. However, I fly EasyJet, and it's a similar service. I'm not expecting the world. They're the cheaper end of the airlines. They're budget airlines. But I get to, when I'm on EasyJet, I feel comfortable. I think that's the word that we should be thinking about, is that I'm not expecting, I pay for what I get. So I'm not expecting, you know, meals and free drinks, but I do expect to feel comfortable, and I do expect to be treated well. And I think what's interesting about that story is that if you have experienced a good service from somebody, you may tell 4, 5, 6 people, and that's probably it. However, if you experience a bad service from someone, you will be telling 20 plus people, at least 20 people, how you feel. And that leads to the next couple of bullet points, because often experience is defined by something people have gone through, they've encountered themselves, but my experience with Ryanair. But more often, experience is affected by something they may have observed or heard. So often your experience is actually driven by something that someone's told you. So the more time I tell people the stories about me and my things, then people might feel negative about that brand as well. It's a bit like diversity, I think, have now become the most complained about dance act on the TV. And the truth of that is, though, the majority of people who have complained didn't even see the act themselves, but they felt compelled to complain because someone else has complained or someone else has told them about it. And I think that's important as well. So it's just not about the experience of the people you are directly interacting with. It's about experience of a wider group, because people encounter these in a very different way. And I put the graphic on the bottom right-hand side deliberately there. So this is kind of like a net promoter score graphic. You know, you sort of the red, amber, greens. You see them a lot in car parks or shops or airports. I see them a lot in baggage handling as I come out of the airports, and you press red, amber, green, depending on how you feel. And there is nothing wrong with that. They are trying to ask some form of sentiment. How do you feel about that? The problem is, though, I'm never sure what they're quite asking me. So if I come out of a baggage, or I come out of showing my passport area, and I get one of those, are they asking me how my baggage was put onto the conveyor belt, or are they asking me about how I felt with the whole airline and the flight and the whole experience journey that I've just encountered? So these things are generally about a single transaction. And I know people who just press red. A friend of mine just presses red the whole time, and I asked him why, and he said, well, they've got to learn somehow. So you're getting false negatives, you're getting false positives, but I just don't, they're not measuring the whole journey, they're measuring a single transaction. And if you want to do that, that's absolutely fine, but just note that's not the whole experience that people have had with you. And the reason why these are all important is that over the last 10, 15 years, things have changed. So I thought I'd just go through what has changed. And here you can see a picture of people watching an event. This is the anointment, if that's the right word, of Pope Benedict XVI. And I guess it's important to note this is 2005. So this was before the first iPhones were really invented. I think they were about 2007. But you can see here people consuming the event for themselves. I think there's one person with a flip phone, but everyone else is consuming the event, watching the event, enjoying the event. But then you roll forward only a few years to 2013, and this is the anointment of Pope Francis. And you can see something very different in terms of the crowd. It's the same event, it's a similar event, same number of people in the same location, but you can see here the big difference is that everyone's got iPhones and iPads, and so they're no longer just consuming the event themselves, they're now actively participating in the event. They're recording the event. They're going to put this on Facebook. They're going to send it to their friends. They're going to put it onto YouTube with no narrative about that at all. It's just what they want people to see from the event that they went to. So you've really moved from passive consumption of an event a few years back to now what everyone is doing is actively participating in the event themselves. And you see this a lot if you go to concerts, any other event, people film the event, so they become producers of that event themselves, and they're actively participating rather than just passively consuming as we're used to. And that leads me to the conclusion that the era of the end user, the term end user, should be banned. The era of the end user is dead. There are no end users at the end of a dumb terminal anymore. People produce things and people consume things at the same time. So your customers are what we call prosumers. Okay, they're whatever you're doing, if you're working through some sort of agile project or quick design, or even in some sort of support mechanism, you know, you are changing things on a rapid basis. So the people you're serving are also part of your design mechanism. So that's what we call the experience economy, and that's really important to understand, because the way that your audience now used to be just sitting there waiting for you to do something and passively consume it like someone at the end of a dumb terminal on the end of a mainframe. This end user term has now changed. They are not doing that anymore. If you don't give them what they want, they will go and get that somewhere else, because they're prosumers. They can actively participate. They'll go out and find something else if you do not give them what they expect you to have, and that's the experience economy. And that leads us to then sort of understand perspective, really. And so if you're thinking about your customers, your internal employees, you've really got to understand where they come from. What's their perspective? Because people consume things in different ways. So there's a great philosopher, a guy called Alain de Botton, and he says that if you're on an aeroplane and you're going into London or you're going into New York, probably 50% of those people on that aeroplane are going away somewhere. So they're going on holiday to London, or they're going on holiday to New York, a business trip, and they're excited and they're thinking about, oh yeah, this is going to be great, all the things I might do over the next week or so, and how great it's going to be. But 50% of those people are coming back from somewhere. They're coming back from holiday, or they're coming back from a business trip, and they're thinking, oh, you know, I've got to go and find my car. Have I got the right ticket? Well, I've got to queue up for that bus again. Oh, the weather's going to be, you know, rubbish. I've got 15,000 emails to read on Monday. Both parties have consumed the same event at the same time, so the flight's been exactly the same. But the way they viewed it is very, very differently. So you have to try and understand people's perspectives and where they're coming from. And this is a great little graphic because it just kind of shows perhaps what we do often in IT. So first one there, how great, we've just put this mobile on the baby's cot, how fantastic it is, I love it. But if you look at it from the other perspective, that's what the baby's seeing. And we do this quite a lot in IT. So we'll often say to people in IT, oh, we're going to give them Office 365. We're going to roll out these new laptops. You know, we're going to put this new service in place. They're going to love it. They're going to think we're great. But actually, quite often, we don't even ask the question of what they really want and try and understand what they're trying to achieve. So we don't really know whether we've hit their objectives because we're not listening and we're not asking the question. So I guess in conclusion to this section, why does experience matter? Well, experience matters because it shapes people's opinions, it shapes their decisions, and it shapes their actions. So whatever you're doing out there, you are shaping people's opinions, decisions, and actions. And whether you agree or disagree with their perception, but their perception is really their reality. So that is what they're going to base an action upon. And experience has consequences. If you do not deliver what your customers expect you to deliver, they will walk away. They will go and vote with their feet. They'll go and vote with their wallets. And if you're thinking, okay, well, maybe they won't because we're in a 3-year managed service contract, or they're actually employees of the organization that I work for, so they don't really have a lot of choice. Well, I'm afraid that the rise of shadow IT has shown me that people do have a choice nowadays. They could easily go and buy something else. Worse than walking away, they'll just ignore you. They'll vote with their wallets. You'll go and finance will say, oh, okay, well, I don't worry about that. We just got a service from AWS on their store, £50 a month. I'll pay that on my credit card and I'll expense that back. And they're ignoring what you're doing. So experience does have consequences. And the other thing to note here is experience is cumulative. So it should be measured over time, because everyone expects things to go wrong. Everything's going to go wrong at some point. and that's okay. It's how you deal with it. So experience is measured over a period of time, but it definitely has consequences, and people will ignore you if you don't get experience right. So if you understand that, and we kind of think, yeah, we agree that experience is important, I just wanted to catch up and talk a bit about SLAs and KPIs, because I imagine this is what most people have been doing. I certainly spent the last part of my career doing this. And I used to put in SLAs like the ones on the left-hand side. So, you know, I guess SLAs, they've been around for about 100 years. I guess probably in the 80s or something, they came into play with probably people like BT and fixed line telecom organizations, and then became into the consciousness of IT. But in the 80s, things were very different. People were end users. You know, the BBC made PCs. The biggest PC out in the market was probably something like the ZX Spectrum, and I've probably got more processing power in the calculator sitting on my desktop here than I had in that whole PC. So things have moved on, but SLAs have remained the same. For 25 years, I was talking about similar SLAs to the ones on the side. Telephone answer time. You must answer the phone in 3 rings. I must respond to that incident within 2 hours. Must fix it next business day. But if you look at the boxes on the right-hand side, what's interesting is most of the organizations actually don't particularly like the SLAs they put in place. They spend ages negotiating them with your IT department, think about it, and put it out as an internal contract to the organization. But most of the employees don't really care. It means nothing to them. Most of the customers don't really care. It means nothing to them. So something is traditionally wrong. And one of the things that I learned through my career is the thing that's wrong is that SLAs don't necessarily mean happiness. So when I said I'd come back to Virgin, so when I was working at an IT managed service company, we won Virgin Management and we won an insurance company in the city. The insurance company in the city, I designed the SLAs, I put them in place, and then we ran the contract for a period of time, and I went in to do the first review. I went into the service desk, and we'd actually hit most of the SLAs we talked about. All good. So I thought this was going to be an easier meeting, but actually I got beaten up at the meeting because the IT director said, I don't really care about those. I can see you've hit most of those, that's fine. But actually, we've still got the same amount of incidents. We've still got the same amount of major incidents. I never see your team. I don't know what they're doing. No one's getting educated. You're not doing all the proactive things that I thought you were going to be doing. So I'm not very happy. And then about a month later, I went into Virgin Management Limited. And I went to the service desk, did the same thing. And we'd hit some of the SLAs, but a lot of them were amber and some of them were red. And I thought, oh, this could be a difficult meeting. But the IT director there said, I don't really care about that, about your SLA. She said to me, I can see your team. I can see that actually you're trying to make proactive measures. And I can see them talking to people. And I can see them trying to help things. So you're doing what's right for our business, not just what's right for your contract. So I learned a big lesson there that SLAs don't equal happiness. It's a bit like the experience I had with Ryanair and EasyJet. The SLAs they have in place do not equal my happiness. It's about something else. And part of that is because experience is made up of both the left brain and right brain thinking. And this is a simplistic model, but the left brain is your logical, your analytical, your objective side, and your right brain is more your intuitive, emotional, and your subjective side. And you often lean more than one way than the other, and you can work out which ones you are. But if you're thinking about making a decision, decisions are generally made between both sides of the brain, maybe more one and less the other, but generally both sides of the brain. So if you're buying a new iPhone, for example, I think about to release, or the new iPad that's been released, you know, you might be thinking, oh, this is brilliant, it's 13 terabytes, it's fully waterproof, it's got fantastic battery life. But on the right-hand side of the brain is thinking, no one else has got one of these, this is going to be really cool, I love this, it looks great, oh, this is fantastic. So your decision is made across both sides. So I guess what we're trying to do with experience level agreements is what we really need to do in IT, which is build an emotional journey for IT with some logic sprinkled in, getting facts from feelings, not a logical journey that we've been doing for 30 years that we aggressively try and manage through SLAs and KPIs, because that isn't just hitting the mark. However, having said all that, should we bin SLAs? Should we get rid of them? No, I'm not suggesting that, because SLAs are still important because they do measure performance and operational data. So we call that the O data. And they do tell people what to do, and they're a good indication of how well something has been done. So if we say to someone, we need this server up 99.9% of the time, we can measure that. Was it up 99.9% of the time? If we say to someone, we want that phone answered in 3 rings, did they answer that phone in 3 rings or 20 seconds? Did we respond to that call within 4 hours? So SLAs are important because they measure this O data, and they're a good quantitative measurement for doing so. The problem, I guess, with SLAs is they just don't measure experience. They have no impact on end user experience, on employee experience. So they don't measure the X data that we've talked about before. So they're just measuring O data and not X data. And I guess that's the problem with the business, really, because businesses expect outcomes. No matter what that business is trying to do, they want to be the best, they want to be the biggest, the one with the most quality. They're driving a business outcome. And the problem with technology and the problem with SLAs and the way we manage technology is technology cannot drive a business outcome. It can help enable a business outcome, but it cannot drive a business outcome because the SLAs and the way we manage it are really only driving outputs. Answer the phone, make that server up more times than it's down, respond to a call in 3 hours, whatever it might be. So that's about outputs, not about outcomes, and business wants outcomes. So we think that an XLA could bridge that gap because an experience level agreement can connect that technical performance that we do in IT with the perception and the business outcome that the business is trying to drive. So we think XLAs do bridge that gap. And this is kind of an interesting, just a graph. I know you've seen this before, or heard of these before, but essentially what we're saying here is the traditional view of SLAs and KPIs is looking like a watermelon. So you have watermelon dashboards in your business if you're not thinking about user experience. And what that really means is that it's green on the outside. So you're showing your business reports and your servers are up and you've answered the phone and they've responded and you've got so many changes done. And that's all green. So you're giving them a green report. So therefore, we've made the logical conclusion that because that's all green, oh, our employees must be ecstatic. We're doing such a great job. We're fantastic. But the reality is if we don't ask the employees the sentiment questions about how they feel about things, then we'll never know. So it's very likely that you're green on the outside, but actually if you drive into that, you're red on the middle. So the red is showing the user sentiment. Whereas what we're trying to do with organizations now is say, actually, you want to be green on the outside. So SLAs and KPIs are all important, but you really want to be green in the middle as well. So you really need to be driving user sentiment questions and making sure that people understand and you're asking those questions about how people feel. So we're trying to get people to fight that watermelon and embrace the kiwi as we go. So we're trying to get people to really understand and ask user sentiment questions and try and get facts from those feelings that those employees have and start driving sentiment surveys. So I just thought it would be interesting. I would like just trying to understand as we share how many people are doing a sentiment survey. So I think we've got another poll here that we can run. I just wanted to try and understand who is measuring experience right now. Who is actually using and understanding, user feelings and user sentiments? Or are you doing something just minimal with that, or are you just doing nothing at all with user sentiment? You might just be asking a customer satisfaction survey, which isn't really user sentiment, because you're just asking people, did we do something? How many of you are actually asking that user sentiment survey? So hopefully if you get a chance to answer that question, it'd be great. We'll just leave that for another second or so, and people get a chance to answer that. Hopefully people have. Jamie, I can't see those again. I probably should be pressing the button. If you could just let me know what's working right.
No worries. Wow, okay, so it's pretty even split across all three. About a third of people are doing ITSM satisfaction surveys, a third not doing anything, and a third are doing something. So that's good. Okay, cool. So the third that are doing something, we'll come to that in a second. But I hope you actually, you're physically asking a question about how someone feels about something. But those who aren't doing anything, or those who are just asking a customer satisfaction survey, just note that customer satisfaction surveys aren't about user sentiment. They're asking about a transaction that you've had with an organization. Did you fix this? How happy were you fixed something? Rather than how do you feel about IT services? So hopefully then the next section will help you and help you understand how you could drive facts from feelings. Because what we're talking about here is how to measure experience. So if we believe that experience is important and that people will walk away or disengage with you, or they vote with their feet, they vote with their wallets, or worse, they'll just totally ignore you, then this is about how we must work out how we can measure experience. And it's not easy because you're trying to get facts from feelings, and feelings are sometimes unquantifiable, and it's more of an art, but there is a way that you can do it, and XLAs can help answer that question. So the first thing I'd say about measuring experience is, well, experience is a journey. Okay, it's typically not one transaction. It could be if that's the only transaction you're ever going to have with somebody,
So if I was at the baggage complaint and they asked me that question, how was baggage? How was your experience with baggage? Then a red, amber, green, hit one of those buttons might suffice, because that's the only transaction I've had with them. So that is about my experience of that. But generally speaking, you're asking about a whole period of time that you're measuring. And if you measure just one transaction, and I'll come back to that, you will get false positives or false negatives. So it's more likely that the experience is going to be measured over that moment in time. And here's a personal journey that I went through. So 12, 13 months ago, I bought a car, not new, but new to me. I shopped around, it was fantastic. They brilliant. You go to these garages, they give you coffees and they show you around the car. I bought the car, they picked me up from the train station. It was fantastic. The journey was really good. They even gave me a water bottle with the brand of the car in. I drove the car for a little bit of time. I thought, well, actually, this is a bit more expensive than I thought. The insurance is more expensive than I thought, but the petrol consumption was a bit more than I'd envisaged. Then things started to go wrong with it, maybe 6 months into it, and my lights failed in the dashboard, kept being intermittent. Apple CarPlay kept falling in and out. So I took it back, they fixed it, and I've got this silly little app on the phone that tells me where my car is and how much fuel it's got. And then 12 months after I bought the car, I got an email from them as if you're still on that app, then we need to charge you 30 quid. And I thought, oh, this is just not right now. And because of all those little things that have happened over that 12, 13 month period, what I've actually decided to do is switch cars. So I'm thinking to myself, perhaps this just wasn't the right car for me. I should have bought that other car that I wanted as well. So my experience over 13 months has gone up and it's gone down and it's changed. But what's interesting is nobody's really asked me the question. The only one time that I was ever asked for feedback was when they fixed my car. It came out of the garage and I got an email from them saying, could you, how well did we fix your car? Were you satisfied, unsatisfied? And that's a customer satisfaction survey that we do in IT. And the issue with that is actually they fixed my car well. I took it in, they took it away, they gave me a video of what was wrong, they sent me an email, they fixed it, it was in warranty, it was all fine. So I answered that very positively because that was the question they're asking me. What they should have asked me was, you've had the car for 13 months now, how do you feel about this car that you've been driving 13 months? How would you recommend this car to friends and family? Would you buy another one of these cars? Because my answer to that question would be quite negative. So it's measured over time, and if we only ask it at a time when we fix something, we're not asking experience, we're asking customer satisfaction, and there's a difference. And here's a slide that's kind of saying it's a deeper look, a similar thing in a way. This is trying to show that in one moment over time, there could be many transactions happening. So, the service desk that we're operating in at the moment, if I log a ticket, something's broken, well, then I'll probably call the desk, there might be repair, there might be rebuild, there might be a reinstall, there might be escalations, there might be callbacks, and before my issue is fixed. And what we're showing with this is all those transactions are unseen. I don't really care about them as the employee. I know that sometimes these things need to happen, but I'm just interested in it was broken and now it's fixed, and I want to get fixed as quickly as possible. But I want to be able to understand where we are with that journey, what's happening, and that's all to do with the communication. So therefore, the point here is that every delivery action, no matter how small or how buried in your organization, from the service desk to second line, someone saying, well, I'm not really involved in customer experience. I'm afraid they are, because every experience, every action, no matter how small, can directly affect your customer experience. I think that's important to note. So I guess if we're talking about experience, then firstly, it's not an annual task. It should not be done just once a year. It needs to be done continuously. Now that's difficult because people get tired of surveys. You don't want to ask them how happy they feel every day of the week. But we've done some really interesting things with some organizations over the past few months. So one of them in a bank in the Netherlands, we set up helped them set up a sentiment survey that essentially ran every quarter, but we surveyed only 25% of the audience every quarter. And the point of that was it was a random sample. We did it all properly, and we helped them with that. But they were getting feedback all the time, which means they could action something all the time. But only everyone was getting asked once a year. So maybe you can do, at 8% of the audience every month. So just do 10% every month, or 25% every quarter. So you're constantly getting feedback, because experience is cumulative and it should be done continuously. Because if you only ask me once a year, I might have had an issue in January. By the time you've asked me in October, I've probably done something different by then. I've probably moved on. I've probably voted with my feet, my wallet, and gone to AWS and done something with that. And the other thing is, when you're measuring experience, you've got to do it with action in mind. Because if you don't have the action in mind when you're doing it, then there's no point doing it at all, because then people will get upset with you. If you ask people how they feel and they tell you they're unhappy, then you've got to respond to that. You know, budget, everyone's got budget constraints, and you may not be able to do a great deal at that point in time, but at the very least, you can go back to them and say, hey, you said this, we've listened, next time we're going to do this, but for the time being, this is where we are. At least people, you're resetting expectations and communicating. So if you are going to start measuring experience, do it often, do it continuously, view it over time. It's not about where you are. If you come up with something, say, well, we're, you know, a number, we're 5 out of 10. Okay, I don't know if that's good or bad. It's not about comparing yourself to someone else necessarily. It's more about what direction of travel are you in? Are we improving experience, or are we not improving experience? So therefore, you know, experience needs new thinking, it needs new processes, and it probably needs new tools. Now, you probably could use the tools you've got if you really wanted to. You've probably got, a lot of you obviously got customer satisfaction tools. You could use them. Just ask a different question. But it does need new thinking and new processes at the very least. So we've understood that, and we've talked about and we've introduced what XLAs are. So let's just go through what an XLA might look like and what an XLA is made up of. So the first thing to say about XLAs, some people call them ELAs and XLAs are the same thing, experience level agreements. First thing I would say is they are not upgraded SLAs. Okay, they do not replace SLAs either. You know, Einstein didn't replace Newton. We are augmenting, improving, but we are not removing SLAs. We are adding value to them. The second thing to say is they are based on user sentiment. That's really key and important here. So you are asking a question about happy are you about something? How do you feel about something I've done? And you are then, you know, waiting for that feedback, and you're trying to understand how people feel about what you've done. The problem is that if you ask people how they feel about a wide-ranging thing, how do you feel about digital experience? How do you feel about our digital workplace environment? That's very hard to people to understand. How do you feel about your new laptop? That's very difficult because I like the weight, I like the screen, the camera was rubbish, and it was silver, and I really wanted a black one. Okay, so I wouldn't know how to score you. So what you often have to do is start thinking about sub-questions. So we use the term experience indicators. So if you come up with an XLA and you come up with a sentiment, you're trying to ask some sentiment questions, sometimes you need to break that down into different components to really understand how people feel. So you couldn't understand, how do you feel about that laptop we've just given you? Perhaps that's too wide ranging. Perhaps you need to ask 3-4 questions to say, how do you feel about the color? How do you feel about the size? How do you feel about the weight? And those answers to those questions would indicate how happy they are with the laptop that you've just given them. So sometimes asking a too broad a question isn't going to work. So break it down into sub-questions, and we call those experience indicators. Also with this, you know, you're trying to get user sentiment. You're trying to understand how people feel. Now, the best way to do that is a survey. We all do that. We all understand surveys. But if you can't get a survey, then there are other mechanisms to do that. You could look at your social media. You could look at Glassdoor. You could look at exit interviews, maybe remove some of the names, look at meeting minutes. There is a lot of user sentiment survey data in your organization today, but perhaps you just don't have visibility. But as I said, probably doing a user survey is probably the most common way and the best way of doing it. So if you're going to put together an XLA model, here's how we would recommend you do it. First of all, we would say, think about what desired outcome you're trying to achieve. What's the business aspiration? What are you trying to achieve personally, your services, your department? What is it you're trying to achieve? And what outcome would you like? You would like everyone's transactions with the service desk to be comfortable. I want 90% of my organization to be happy with the digital workplace environment. I want everyone in my organization to be able to work seamlessly from anywhere. There's an outcome you're trying to drive. Okay, so write down the outcome you're trying to achieve. Then what you can do is come up with a measurement of that. So if your outcome is I want everyone in my organization to work seamlessly from anywhere, what measurement are you going to put against that? You'll never please everybody. You know, 10% of your organization hate you, just they always will. You know, 10% of your organization love you, they always will. It's really about those people in the middle you're trying to garner here. So come up with a measurement. Is it 80%, 70%, 90%? So say, I want 80% of my organization to work seamlessly from anywhere. That is a fantastic experience level agreement you've just garnered, and that's achieving your desired outcome. But you can't ask that question in user sentiment. How do you feel about, can you work anywhere remotely? Okay, well, that's probably too wide ranging. So you've got to come up with some sub questions, and there's your experience indicators. So how do you feel about using Microsoft Teams, or how do you feel about using Zoom? How do you feel about the remote access server? They're the questions you might need to ask, because people can transact with that and ask that. So an example might be that, as we said before, asking someone here, how do you feel about how happy are you with your mobile device? That's too wide ranging. So I want that as the outcome. I want people to be happy with their mobile device, but therefore I'm going to come up with an XLA that says 95% of my mobile staff are happy with their mobile phone or their tablets or whatever I've given them. But if I ask that, I'm probably not going to understand the answers. So I've come up with 3 XIs here. How happy are you with the battery life? How happy are you with the size? And are you able to read the screen outside? Now, if they answer those questions positively, then I'm achieved my experience level agreement, which has underpinned my outcome. If we get some negatives in there, then I haven't, and I can work that out and I can start measuring that. So that's about how you ask the X data, this experience data, probably with a survey. There are other mechanisms, but probably with a survey. But then what you want to do is also snap in some O data. So we built this model out, which kind of, the first 3 boxes at the top are the same. You come up with your desired outcome. Now, if you're on an aeroplane, I want 85% of, I want all my customers to feel comfortable and safe on their flight. Well, perhaps then my XLA would be, I want 80% of my customers to feel comfortable and safe on their flight, because I know that I'm going to upset some regardless of whatever happens. So there's a great XLA. And then I might need to think about what XI questions am I going to ask. So I could say, how do you feel about the safety briefing? How do you feel about the comfort of your chair? How do you feel about the infotainment? And then I can start thinking, who's involved in that, delivering that? There'll be, there'll be the menus, there'll be the chefs, there'll be the cabin crew, there'll be the pilot. And what SLAs do they have today, that are already in place today, that underpin my direct experience? Maybe 100% of flights need to have a safety briefing. Maybe that all meals are delivered within, to the chair within an hour of the flight. We do 3 every 20 minutes. We sweep the plane for debris to make it a comfortable experience for the passengers. They're all SLAs that you've got in place already. But now what we're saying is, we understand those SLAs have a direct impact on experience. And I'm not saying ignore all the other SLAs. You wouldn't be able to do that. I'm saying you probably want to keep those because they're good for outputs. All I'm saying is focus on the ones that have a direct impact on experience. So I guess like all good Blue Peter presenters, here's one I made earlier. So here's one we talked about: productive employees working from anywhere. I want 95% of employees happy they're productive remotely. So the questions I would ask is, how do you feel about remote access server? How do you feel about your device work for remote working? How do you use collaboration tools? And a team of people I then start looking at, going, who's involved in that? Well, I've got the network team, so the RAS server needs to be up. I've probably got product supply, I've got learning services, and they've already got SLAs in place. So I take those and I put them into the model, and I start thinking, these are the golden SLAs and KPIs that have a direct impact on the experience, and they're the ones I should focus on. I'll do the others, but these are the ones I'm going to talk about more than that, because this is having a direct impact on how my employees are experiencing the services I've got. Hopefully that makes sense for everybody, because the next topic I wanted to do is just in the next couple of minutes really is just to go through what we can do once you get those XLAs in place. So we have a term called the Experience Management Office. So if we're happy that we can measure that experience, and we're happy that we've got an XLA framework, and we've started to think about experience outcomes, and we started to put an XLA together, and we've started to ask experience indicator questions to our employees, and we've snapped in some SLAs and KPIs that are already in the business, and we can see a direct link between those and experience. What else do we need to do? There's more to think about. So you need to start thinking about who's going to do this. How are we going to do it? So we've called this the Experience Management Office. Now, often in organizations I've seen and supported over the last few months, we extend the Service Management Office. So this might be even people on this call here, this webinar here, who might be thinking, oh, I'd like to get involved in this. So extend out your Service Management Office to become more experience-based, rather than just asking satisfaction questions, ask experience questions. But it's the XMO that's going to put in the new processes, probably some new tools at some point, because your customer satisfaction service will only take you so far. But they're the people who create the XLAs, they're the people who create the XIs, they update them, they change them. But they're also the people who understand how to get a sentiment survey out there. What questions to ask, how often to ask, who am I asking, how often am I asking it, am I asking the right questions, have I got a good sample population of the people, because I don't want to ask all HR or all or salespeople or whatever it might be. I need a good cross section. But they're also the people who, once they've done that, they understand, okay, how am I going to score that? I've got these answers. People have said, I perhaps asked the question, score me out of 5 or 7 or whatever it might be. What dictates happy? Is it everyone between 5 and 7? Or is it everyone between 4 and 7? Or is it only 6 and 7? So you've got to come up with what you're going to drive as happy. You know, when people answer your questions and you give them a scoring mechanism, how happy do you feel about this? Rate me from 1 to 10. What's happy? What's medium? What's sad? You've got to come up with that scoring mechanism. And there's industry standards, but it doesn't matter whether it's not where you are with other people, it's where you are yourself. So as long as you're continually measuring the same thing and you're improving experience, then that's what's important. But then once you get those results and you get that through, someone in this experience management office has got to say, okay, I've just understood that people are unhappy with things, or we've got a large people of people who aren't very happy with what we've done. So what is that important? And if it is important, what are you going to do about that? And as I said, we've all got budget restrictions, so we all understand that, but you can at the very least go back to people and you can at the very least communicate with them about what you intend to do, or if you can't do anything, then at least communicate that, because then you're resetting their experience expectation, and that's the key thing. So the XMO not only does the sentiment surveys and understands how they work and asks the questions and creates the XLAs and creates the XIs, snaps together some key performance indicators in that model that they can start reporting back to the business. Look, these things are impacting experience and the experience journey that people are having. But then asking the questions, what are we going to do with this, and so what? Is this important? And if it is important, what are we going to do now? So that's the concept of the XMO that I'd also like people to think about as they come away from this webinar. But as I said at the start, really, what my aim here is to sort of give people some motivation, some inspiration to try and change things. So what I'd really like you to do is just think about how you make people feel about your service, your product, your organization, your department, whatever it is. Think about that right now. How do you make people feel? And then imagine how you might want to make them feel. You want to make them be much happier with what you're doing. You want to make them feel at the very least comfortable with what you're doing. If it's a difficult job, make them comfortable. But you'd like people to be delighted. And then you can think about how you might need to change or improve your team, your colleagues, things that you do to improve that customer experience. That's what you're driving for. And then imagine if you did that, what could happen to you, your team, your services, if your customers were delighted? What would be the impact? You'd grow, you'd be more successful, all of those things. So think about all of those things and imagine what could happen. Because then you can start thinking about, okay, if I believe in all this, then let me think about what outcome I'm trying to drive. Let me try and think about what XLAs could be important to me. Let me come up with an XLA. Let me actually put a measurement against that XLA. Let me think about the questions I might need to ask my customers, my employees, how we're doing against that XLA. And then I can think about the SLAs and the KPIs that I have in place already that could underpin that journey that they're going through. That's what I'd really like everyone to do. However, if you can't do that and you can only remember one thing from anything I've just said, what I'd love you to remember is this, which is people will forget what you said, people will forget what you did, but people will never forget how you made them feel. And that sums up why experience and improving employee experience is key. Okay, so that's me done. I think we've got a few minutes now for questions. I think Jamie's going to look through the chat and look at some questions. Before we do that, though, I just wanted to say that, and Jamie might cover this at the end as well, but we have an Essence of Experience course running with Service Desk Institute on the 21st of October. So as members of that, it'd be great if you could sign up, come to that class. That is a fully accredited course, and we go through a number of mechanisms. We physically build an XLA in class and give you that experience of doing so. And at the end of it, you can take the exam and become an accredited XLA champion. So yeah, it'd be great if people could come onto that. So look out for that. It's on the web, it'll be on the SDI website. If people want more details about that, then please feel free to contact me. My details are on the screen as well. Fantastic. All right, Jamie. Cool. Yep. If anyone's got any questions, and I'll do my best to answer them.
Brilliant. Thank you, Neil. Okay, a question if you don't mind about the course. So is the XLA champion? Is that the only qualification? Is there a kind of is there
so there's
like
three
foundation level or?
Yeah. So So there's 3 courses in a row. So the XLA champion is kind of like the foundation level. In fact, we're moving that to be a foundation exam, a bit in line with more sort of the ITIL type of thing. So so that would be the foundation level. So that would be we call it Essence of Experience, but that's the foundation course. You can then go on. They've got 2 other courses. One is called Mastering the XLA Framework. So that teaches people how you physically, all the information you need to build out a relevant XLA to your organization. And the other one is Mastering the XMO. And we teach people what an XMO does, what roles you might need, what competencies you might need. We talk about tools, we talk about techniques, we talk about processes, but we also, very importantly, talk about how you can get a user sentiment survey out, what the statistics, the maths, the art and science of driving user sentiment surveys, really. That's what we teach people. So that, and if you take one of those 2, you become a master. So you get a champion and you become a master. If you take both masters, you can become an ambassador. So there's the accreditations in a row.
Okay, cool. So one of the questions you've had in is about, like, I suppose you've got the security, if you like, of SLAs traditionally is that they're not, they're objective. You know, they're driven data. They're kind of, you know, they're stats that have come off the back of results of something happening, and the outcomes. And as you've said, the XLAs are you know, about the experience can be a little bit more subjective. So how would you convince, say, you know, you've probably got a lot of people in an organization who may have been there for a long time, who are doing things a certain way, to kind of, how would you go about convincing them that of looking into this kind of new way of thinking?
Well, so I think the first part of that is all about communication. So people have to sort of have a light bulb moment, and we hope these sort of presentations like this or the Essence of Experience exam does that. But one of the things that you'll see driving a lot of this now is that the remote workings, funny enough, help this sort of movement because people are experiencing things differently from home. But as you see more successful companies that are successful are now saying they became successful because they really worried about employee or customer experience. So the types of organizations like the Virgins, like the big sort of some of the managed service players are all driving employee experience. And one of the things that I always think is a game changer, really, is if you can just go and, even in a small group, doesn't have to be a big thing, even in a small group, if you can go and ask some user sentiment surveys, just go and ask how people feel about, you know, how do you feel about your digital workplace environment? You know, how do you feel about your laptop? How do you feel about what we're doing within IT? You'll get a mixed response back, and some of that response will be good because, as I said, 10% of those people in the organization will probably love you. Doesn't matter what you do, they love you. 10% will hate you, so okay, ignore them. You probably, but it's the 80% in the middle. And if you get you'll get a mixed response from that, and with that you take that back to the business and say, hey, here's what people are actually saying. This is what people are doing, and it's almost becoming not a should we do it? It's becoming a how do we do it? Because organizations, if you're not doing this, organizations are struggling to recruit good quality people. If they have got them in the organization, you're struggling to retain good quality people. You'll see, if you're not doing this, you'll see the rise of shadow IT going on. People will be leaving. So there is some really good, I've got a sheet on it, people's interested in it, but there's a really good business case sheet that I've got, which talks about the facts and the figures of how you can improve your revenue, how you can reduce your costs, how you can improve customer retention, and overall shareholder value of an organization by focusing on employee experience. So that's how I would answer it. Probably a long answer.
Thank you. All right, we've got a question from a Luke Murphy. He says, have you linked or seen anywhere where XLAs have been linked to service level credits, and how that may have gone from a commercial perspective? Yeah,
that's a really good question. And the answer to that is yes, I have. In fact, I've helped put those in terms of this consultancy that I've done. So there's a couple of there. There's a few things we do in contracts. So we have different ranges of organizations. So some organizations will say, we're talking really about managed service type organizations here, that if you don't achieve something, then you get penalized. But there has to be a consequence of not achieving experience. And a lot of customers, I'm doing one right now, in fact, a customer is changing managed services partners, and they're asking me if I can help put in some XLAs into that contract that they can measure. Because what they're saying is, well, it's all very well they hit all these greens, but if my employees are still unhappy, then I want some consequence for that IT supplier. So there's two things you can do, or probably three things you can do. I've had some organizations say, well, we can't do that. So we just put in the contract the fact that they will measure experience and they will do those user sentiments. So the contractual obligation is that they will do some sentiment surveys, etc. But customers are driving much more than that, and customers are saying, no, we want more than that. So often what we've said is, in that XLA, so we've said maybe 80% of people need to be happy. That doesn't necessarily kick in day one, because suppliers don't necessarily know what it's like now. It could be 30% of people are happy now. So maybe you're driving up to year 2 or 18 months later in the contract. That's where the 80% will start kicking in. And they can have a consequence of that, which could be a financial penalty, or you could just say, we've already got the financial penalties in the SLAs and KPI measures. So therefore, if you don't achieve the experience, we'll penalise you in the SLA and KPI. Even if they're green, we'll take that penalty out and we'll put that penalty in for experience, and we'll penalise you for that, because there has to be a consequence somewhere. So I see it more and more, actually, and it depends on the organisation of what they're happy to accept. It could just be some simple things in the contract, but customers are now saying, no, we want 70% of our employees to be happy with the services that this person's providing. And if they're not happy, I don't really care about the SLAs. Not interested. They're not happy. So therefore, we need to measure that. I understand that we won't do that day one, so we'll put that in year 2 of the contract. So you've got a year to get up to speed with it, and then we'll start measuring that happiness rating. And if you don't achieve it, then we will penalise you for it. So yes, I've seen it more and more and more.
Cool. Thanks for that, Neil. We've had it's quite a similar question from Dan as well, which I think you've covered. And a final question to wrap up on. And if there's any more questions, then you know you've got Neil's contact details on the screen there, and we will SDI will also be following up for all attendees after this. So there'll be a further opportunity to continue the discussion. But the last question from Martin is around sort of the engagement. What's your tips, Neil, on sort of capturing those people that aren't engaged, that never respond to the surveys? You know, those people that you get, it's like you send a survey out and you get maybe 5–10% of people that respond.
Well, yeah, that's another very good question. You're asking a user sentiment survey, and you've got to have enough responses, because you're going to actually do something with this data you're having back. So you're going to change something, you're going to improve something. And it can be a long haul if your organisation is so tired and don't fill in any surveys in. But actually, what we found is that with good communication around the business, say, look, we're setting up this user sentiment survey, and this is the reasons we're doing it, and we're going to do it because we're going to do something with the data. People tend to respond to the sentiment survey more than they would respond to a customer satisfaction survey. The other thing is the mechanism. So what we've worked out is if you've got a satisfaction survey sitting in the back of your ITSM tool, that will typically be run off email, and it might link to a portal for people to answer questions to. The problem with that is that everyone's receiving so many emails. You get it in one day, and it will sink right to the bottom of it won't be on your screen by lunchtime. So you forget about it quite instantly. So that's why you only get sort of 5, 10, 15% in customer satisfaction surveys. If you can invest in a tool that does a little pop-up, so the ones I've seen that people respond to most, it'll pop up at the bottom right of the screen somewhere. Have you got 3 seconds to respond to this survey, or 10 seconds? Show them all the questions up front, because otherwise people kind of go, oh, I don't really know. If you say this will take no more than a minute, we're going to ask you 4 questions, bang. Then I think, and you make it easy, click, 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 then I think people will actually respond to that much better than they would respond to click on this email, open the email up, go to the portal, see lots of questions in the portal, because people just think, oh, I'm busy, I won't bother doing that. So make it easier for them to respond, probably the pop-up, but also I would say, if you communicate well before you do this and explain to people why you're doing it for their benefit, and you're doing it because you're going to improve things depending on what they say, then I think you will find most people, you get a much higher response rate. And I've seen some of the things we've done before, that talked about the bank doing it on a quarterly basis. They're getting 70–80% response rates. They do it, make it easy, but people also know that actually if I do respond to this, something's going to change, so I will do it. So that's how I would recommend.
Cool. Well, thank you very much for your time, Neil. I've enjoyed it. I hope everyone else has. And yeah, look out for the follow-up emails that come out. And Neil, I'll see you again on the 21st of October.
Looking forward to it, Jamie, and hopefully people will come to that. Thanks very much for everyone for listening. Appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.